AI is incredible. It can teach you how to fry an egg and even write a poem, pirate style. Yarr! But it knows nothing about your work. Slackbot is different. It doesn't just know the facts. It knows your schedule. It can turn a brainstorm into a brief. And it doesn't need to be taught. Because Slackbot isn't just another AI. It's AI that knows your work as well as you do. Visit slack.com/meet Slackbot to learn more.
Walmart Business is in the business of saving you time, money, and hassle. Whether your business started in a garage or is a garage, Walmart Business has the tools to help you get where you're going. Tools like free shipping, multi-user accounts, and just about any item your company needs.
Even a double filtration cyclone dust collector.
Yep, even that.
Sweet.
Walmart Business. It's the Walmart you love. Now for your business. Learn more at business.walmart.com. Terms apply.
Welcome to the Ivory Tower Boiler Room, an arts and culture podcast. I'm Dr. Andrew Rimby, the host and founder. Wherever you are listening, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, please do me a favor, make sure you're following the show and make sure that you rate and review us. It really means a lot, and it continues to allow me to get really exciting guests for the podcast and to continue delivering the podcast for free. Remember, though, we do have a Patreon, so if you don't want to listen to ads and you want to watch the video episodes of the podcast, patreon.com/Ivory Tower Boiler Room. Do you know that there is a book club? It's free and virtual. So easy to just join the book club in your pajamas on a Sunday afternoon. Our next book club is June 22nd at 5 p.m. We are reading Sophie Gilbert's Girl on Girl, How Pop Culture Turned a Generation of Women Against Themselves. She writes for The Atlantic. She is such an amazing pop culture expert. So if you've always wondered, wait, why did the paparazzi harass Britney Spears like that? Or did the Spice Girls really have a love-hate relationship with each other? You're going to want to read this book. So to join the book club, email ivorytowerboilerroom@gmail.com and I will give you the Zoom link, June 22nd, 5 p.m. Without further ado, and a brief message of thanks. Thank you to Mary DePippi, the chief contributor, and Christian Garcia, who edits this podcast, and my fiance and parents, who continue delivering really creative ideas my way. And without further ado, here's today's episode.
Raise the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an Enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more. Start converting your B2B audience today. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a free $250 credit for the next one. Get started today at linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
On December 12th, Disney Plus invites you to go behind the scenes with Taylor Swift in an exclusive 6-episode docuseries.
I wanted to give something to the fans that they didn't expect. The only thing left is to close the book.
The end of an era. And don't miss Taylor Swift, The Eras Tour, the final show, featuring for the first time the Tortured Poets Department. Streaming December 12th, only on Disney Plus.
Hey, true crime friends, welcome back to True Crime in Academia. I am your host, Mary DePippi. I know it has been so long. Obviously, as always, it's never intentional. Let's see, where do I begin? I guess let's get back to last September. I got promoted. I was trying to just get my footing, and then it felt like I was starting to for a little bit, and I had some true crime episodes. And then early December, my boss passed away unexpectedly. So yeah, that was a huge hit. Not only just as a loss, of him selfishly in my life on a day-to-day, and as someone who I looked up to for his genuine passion for the company. And, I can only speak for myself, but he always had a way of really inspiring you and just making you care about the company. And that's just something that was so unique to him. And he just was such a champion for our line of business. And even more so, what I think touched me was his passion for our manufacturing team. And like, my boss was a vice president for a global line of business at our company. So the fact, like, he could kind of do whatever he wanted, right? He was high up enough where, you would think in most companies that's probably the case. Like, you probably don't see your VPs very often unless, their office is there and there's someone who likes to come to the office every day. Otherwise, you don't really see them. And arguably, I barely saw my boss, to be fair, because he was traveling so much, but he would spend a lot of time in our manufacturing facility and tried to make sure he balanced his time between our office where I work and our manufacturing facility. And even to that point, like, I would argue that he probably knew everyone's name there that worked there, like on the line and the temps and everything. So, and again, he just genuinely cared about all of them and was always looking for different ways to improve the plant and the employee spaces there and things like that. So not only was he a huge loss, to me personally in my life, he was also a huge loss to our company. And the aftermath of that has been extremely stressful. To not sugarcoat it or anything. Being the lead person in my department for what I do for, marketing, I was responsible for creating a lot of the aftermath collateral for that. So any tributes that had to be written, any collage, like picture collages, videos, things like that. That was something I had to undertake. And while I'm grateful that I had the opportunity to do that, it was arguably one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. And I mean, again, it was very cathartic at times and some ways helpful. But of course, like, as you all know, business waits for no one and does not care. So while we're all trying to grieve the loss of, our boss and our friend, we're also like, okay, well, now that he's gone, we need to figure out how to run this line of business for the company in his absence and, keep moving on because, again, business does not care. So, just a lot of conflicting things because obviously, when literally like the days after you're discussing like who you're going to report to and how it's all going to work. And, while you're still trying to like accept the fact that he's gone and all of that, it was just very internally, very conflicting feelings because you understand that, business has to carry on as usual, regardless of what's happened. And those types of decisions and things need to be happened and made sooner rather than later, right? But from a grieving standpoint, like the only way that I can explain this is just like it made my insides feel like they were twisting around. Like that was it's just how uncomfortable it felt. Because again, that these conversations have to happen, but that grief in there, it does not feel right. So, of course, if the passing of my boss wasn't enough, It also occurred like a month before our annual kickoff. So at that point, we were ramped up work-wise. I'd also had a new employee that I was training, which she is amazing and doing phenomenal right now. So there was all of that going on. There were a couple of like work-related emergencies. Content was lost somewhere, or we thought it was lost somewhere, wound up finding it again. But anyway, then we had to have our annual sales kickoff, which, because of one of the crazy storms in late January, we had to reschedule at the last minute. So that was just absolute chaos. And then, the kickoffs itself are just absolute chaos. And of course, after that, for a little while, work was pretty insane as far as like the sheer amount of work that needed to be done. But I'm also very lucky that I work with a team that's just always giving their 110% and never shies away from a challenge or anything like that. So I am very, very grateful for them, because I personally know that I would not have been able to get through all of that without them. But yeah, so that's just everything that has been going on with me and why I've been on this little mini hiatus type of a thing. I'm still trying to find my footing with everything going on. So just bear with me. Do my best moving forward to get episodes out for you guys, because I really do enjoy doing this. I love researching these cases and sharing what I've learned with all of you. And if anything, I've only ever wanted to continue to make this better. So in doing so, I've actually video recorded. So when you see this up on YouTube, or on here too, actually. But either way, if you would like the option, you can now see my face that isn't just a static photo of me. So this month being Women's History Month, I decided to go with a different type of case and a different type of story to more reflect that. And also at the time of the recording for that episode, it was actually International Women's Day. So again, I just thought this case was very fitting for the day and the month. So real quick, we're going to take a quick break, and then when we get back, we will discuss the murder of Dian Fossey.
The spring season is here, which means there's a new issue of the Gay and Lesbian Review called Victorian Times, all about my favorite period of literature, the 19th century. And you'll see a rugged Walt Whitman on the cover and the dandy Oscar Wilde. Well, guess what? My first article is now published in the Gay and Lesbian Review, called Once Upon a Time in Camden. It's the intro to my book, which looks into their queer literary relationship, but also Whitman and Wilde's homoerotic poetics, and specifically what Whitman does with male same-sex desire before the category of homosexuality even existed. Like, how did he even express this in his poetry? Well, you'll have to read my book to find out. Book coming soon. If you know of a publisher, let me know. I'm shopping around right now. But this Victorian issue is so special with the Gay and Lesbian Review. There's articles on Dr. Jekyll and Victor Frankenstein. I'm about to see The Bride, which I can't wait to see. And right, Guillermo del Toro's new Frankenstein is all the rage. There's an article on Monte Cristo's Women in Love, Tchaikovsky's Men. I love Tchaikovsky's ballet. I'm particularly an admirer of The Sleeping Beauty. One on Captain Cobb. There's film and TV shows reviewed, like Heated Rivalry, Boots, Kiss of the Spider Woman, which, if you don't know, I had an episode with Jeremy Fox from the Gay and Lesbian Review, the managing editor, and Colin Carmen and Joseph Federico, and we talked all about Heated Rivalry. You have to listen to it. And Kiss of the Spider Woman, I keep recommending to everyone. It is an astounding film. Boots, I actually had the creator Greg Cope White on the podcast too. You'll have to listen to his interview. Also, if you haven't heard our episode on the kink issue of the magazine, it's really, really interesting. And the ethnography one. And yes, there will be an episode soon about the Victorian issue. So get your hands on the Gay and Lesbian Review. The digital subscription is really easy to get, glreview.org. The print subscription also, head on over to the website, click subscribe, use the promo code ITBR Choice. You get a free issue of the magazine. Choose the Victorian issue, will you? So head to their Instagram, their TikTok. I love the Gay and Lesbian Review. I get so many book recommendations, TV show, film recommendations. One of the films that I can't wait to watch is in this issue. I want to say it's pronounced Pillion or Pillion. I think I made a French there with Alexander Skarsgård. So enjoy your reading, everyone. And if you're reading the Gay and Lesbian Review, please reach out to me. I want to let them know, that you all listening to this podcast are reading their magazine.
Dian Fossey was born on January 16th, 1932, in San Francisco, California. When she was very young, her parents got divorced and her mother remarried soon after. She was raised mainly by her mother and her stepfather, and according to Wikipedia, it seemed that her mother was the one who had discouraged contact between Dian and her biological father, and the relationship kind of fizzled out in her childhood, but luckily she was able to rekindle that years later. But because of that, it seemed like her biological father wasn't involved in her life very much. And sadly, her stepfather didn't seem to be that much better. He seemed to be neglectful at best and never really viewed her as one of his own. Now, again, because this information came strictly from Wikipedia, who knows if that's really true, but it also would kind of make sense that because of this, Dian formed really an affinity for animals and, really just gravitated towards them. And she started horseback riding at a young age. And by the time she actually graduated college, she was considered to be an established equestrian. So not only was she just someone who really loved animals, she also really put in the time and effort that it would take, to get to that type of high level of horseback riding. So, of course, her love of animals would put her down a career path of wanting to be pre-veterinarian. And she enrolled in the University of California, Davis. And this actually was against her stepfather's wishes. He wanted her to study business, but she went behind his back and decided to take a biology course and, start the process of becoming pre-vet. So because of this, her mother and stepfather cut her off financially, and she had to support herself her way through college. Luckily for her, this was at a time where you were able to do that, unlike when, say I was in college. You needed to have worked almost a full-time job, if not more, than, to be able to afford what college costs today versus, what people are actually being paid. But anyway, beside the point, she was able to do that. And she worked as a clerk in a department store. And then she also, what I thought was cool, was worked as a machinist in a factory. So she worked these two jobs to support herself through college. Now, Dian was a really good student. However, like some of us, certain subjects just don't click and we just can't wrap our heads around them. It happens sometimes. And for her, those were a couple of science classes that she had to take. So she eventually transferred to San Jose State College, and there she got her degree in occupational therapy in 1954. Now, with a career in occupational therapy, this led Dian to work in quite a few hospitals, including a children's hospital in Kentucky, where she lived on the outskirts of Louisville and lived on her own farm, where she had her own farm animals, and that was how she spent all of her free time. In September of 1963, after taking out a loan and using up her entire life savings, Dian was able to go on a 7-week trip through Africa, and that completely altered the course of her life and her career path. So on this trip, she met quite a few influential people, and two of those were Mary Leakey, who was a paleoanthropologist, and Mary's husband, Louis Leakey, who was an archaeologist. My bad. Not to be confused with anthropology. Those are two separate things. But meeting them, and we'll see a little bit later, they will help even more so influence this decision for her to leave occupational therapy and returned to studying animals, gorillas specifically. Now, also on this trip, she met wildlife photographers Joan and Alan Root. At the time that she was there, they were working on a documentary about African gorillas. And they invited her on one of their trips to search for some primates, for footage for their documentary and also to study. On this trip, Diane completely fell in love with these gorillas and was just absolutely and completely inspired by them and desperately just wanted to continue working with them and being among them. This trip would also inspire the content for her autobiographical work and best-selling novel titled Gorillas in the Mist. And one of the quotes that was told that's most popular as to why she really just had such an affection for these creatures is, quote, "It was their individuality combined with the shyness of their behavior that remained the most captivating impression of this first encounter with the greatest of the great apes," she said. Quote, "I left Kabara with reluctance, but with never a doubt that I would somehow return to learn more about the gorillas of the Misted Mountain."
How many discounts does USAA Auto Insurance offer? Too many to say here. Multi-vehicle discount, safe driver discount, new vehicle discount, storage discount, legacy.
How many discounts will you stack up? Tap the banner or visit USAA.com/auto discounts. Restrictions apply.
Whether you bond over streaming binge-worthy videos, watching sports recaps, video gaming, or by unplugging altogether, the 2026 Lincoln Nautilus Hybrid helps keep you connected throughout your journey. Learn more at Lincoln.com. Available connectivity features and functionality vary by model. Package pricing, trials, and term lengths vary by model. Video streaming and games are only available while parked.
What does Sunset Boulevard, The Sound of Music, Vertigo, Snow White, The Wizard of Oz, and even Rebecca have in common? They've been covered on my friend Christian Garcia's podcast called That Old Gay Classic Cinema. Every time he is researching and deep diving a film with his guests, he asks the question, what's so queer about this film? You're going to love his podcast. You can listen to it on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and follow him on Instagram and TikTok at That Old Gay Classic Cinema. I hope you all enjoy it as much as I do.
In 1966, so roughly 3 years after her trip to Africa the first time, Louis Leakey and Diane meet up at a lecture, and he invites her to take this long-term study of the endangered gorillas in the Rwandan mountain forest. She, of course, is like, absolutely, packs her stuff and goes over and lives in the mountains pretty much until the civil war that was happening and going on tragically at that time forced her to leave. About a year later, in 1967, she established what was called, and we all know I'm going to mess this up, but I'm going to try my best, the Karasok Research Foundation in the Rwanda Volcanoes National Park. And this was to help study or help facilitate the study of mountain gorillas. During this time, she was also working on getting her PhD at Cambridge University. So I'm sure you guys have heard Andrew talk about this. I mean, there is so much work that goes into getting your PhD, and especially in these types of fields where you're using the field research that you're conducting on your own and using that as like the main point of your education during that time. So I can't even imagine the amount of workload that she had. Plus, again, she's living in the mountains. There's, again, time period wise, there wasn't much technology. It's not like she was missing a cell phone or anything at that time, but you know, it's still just this crazy concept of, and maybe not crazy to some people, obviously. To me, I'm grateful that people do this, don't get me wrong, but to me, I'm not someone who thinks that, oh yeah, let me just go live in the mountains among these gorillas that I'm going to study, you know, because they're wild animals, obviously. And, there are a lot of things that could go wrong in that scenario and in that situation. So that's all I'm saying. Diane finally earned her PhD in 1976. And then from there, she actually accepted a visiting associate professorship at Cornell University. So they're basically saying, like, hey, come teach whenever you can, kind of a thing. And, I think that, again, just speaks to the type of research she was doing, the hard work she was putting in, and, also her friendships and relationships with people like the Leakeys and the Roots. So, she really was making a name for herself. Now, in 1983, that is when she finally published her autobiographical work, The Gorillas in the Mist. It immediately, or soon after, I believe, became a bestseller. And eventually in 88, they turned it into a movie where Sigourney Weaver plays her, which I thought was pretty cool. So it kind of goes without saying, but she was a fierce advocate for gorillas and spoke out to the media outlets and, advocated for them, and even sometimes took matters into her own hands by destroying poacher traps. So, of course, you can imagine in her line of work, not only is she dealing with conservationism issues, such as, like, making sure that the government isn't selling off land to make whatever. I mean, here it's normally, just buildings and stuff. I believe I remember reading one of the issues she was pointing out was that they were making them for farms, and just taking the land away from, the gorillas that lived there, and more of them were becoming endangered. Again, also along with that, you also have issues of poaching. So, she was really also trying to help reduce the efforts of the poachers. And like I said, being well known, a lot of people knew who she was and kind of where to find her, unfortunately. So sadly, on December 26, 1985, Diane was found brutally murdered at her forest camp. Everything that I saw said it depicted her manner of death as being hacked. So again, it was presumed that her murder was committed by a group of poachers. And to this day, no one has been charged. I don't even think there have been any suspects in her murder. Like I said, it was presumed to have been committed by one of the local poaching groups who, either maybe she destroyed one of their traps or, something like, or they just didn't want her around anymore. But yeah, so you can only imagine the types of instruments when you hear that phrase coupled with the fact that that's what they do. So, yeah, very horrible, brutal murder of this woman who just wanted to protect the wildlife, And, again, sadly, no one knows who did it. No one knows why. I mean, they can assume why, especially if that's the angle that you're going with. And, it's just absolutely horrific to have to go through that, and be the embodiment, kind of a martyr for her cause. Now, today, her work continues through the Dian Fossey Gorilla Fund International, and that supports her research foundation, the Karasok Research Foundation. Now, the fund's activities include protections of eastern lowland gorillas in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, also mountain gorillas at the Nurunga National Park, and also other endangered species in those areas. If you would like to learn more about this fund, or if you would like to donate, you can go to gorillafund.org. So, again, I kind of wanted to cover this case mainly because, again, it's not International Women's Day. I wanted to highlight a woman who, did a lot for wildlife and things like that. But also, like I mentioned, with everything just going on, I felt like we needed not that this is a lighter, but a more easily digestible way to ease us back in to true crime. So that is all I have for you, my loves. Don't forget to follow True Crime in Academia on social media at True Crime in Academia. Also, go to patreon.com/Ivory Tower Boiler Room to become a subscriber. You can get access to this episode and all True Crime in Academia episodes ad-free. All right, my darlings, until next time, I will see you all later.